Good evening, and I'd like to call tonight's regular board meeting to order. I have 6:10, so we could all rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I am still.
It took me a while to figure out when I was on that special ed.
I'd like, before we start with the consent agenda, I would like to ask if there could be some agreement to add some items to our agenda. One of the things that we had talked about, we didn't, was the fall sports. And one of the things that has come up in multiple conversations is the use of masks here at school, so I would like to include that in a conversation. And is there anybody else who has other items that come to their attention?
Yeah, I'd like to add a brief discussion on meeting notices.
Do we have consensus to add those to the agenda? We can add them under new business. Karen, is that an appropriate place to put them? Okay, good, thank you. As far as the consent agenda, is there any part of that, anyone would like to have a part of that separated? Entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
So move.
We'll give him a second.
Not out here, you didn't, but okay. Second.
I'm muted.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. At this time, I would like to open it up to the public for public comment. If there's anybody who would like to share anything with the board this afternoon.
Who are you?
Hi, this is Amy Maxwell. Can you hear me, Dan? Okay, so this is Amy Maxwell. I just wanted to say thank you to the board. The playground is amazing. The colors are amazing. Yes, the colors are amazing, and it's by far the coolest playground in the entire county. Well done.
Awesome, thank you.
I agree.
Is there anybody else who would like to say anything? We're good? All right. We'll have an opportunity later on in the meeting if anybody has anything then. The next thing on the agenda is an update from the capital project. We have a report attached to the agenda from our construction managers, but Dr. Glover, if there's anything you'd like to...
It's the past couple of weeks have been about a transition from really a construction focus on campus to returning to school. They're not the smoothest of transitions between the two, but I think by the time we got the school started, it was some issues that were brought up and have been addressed. I have had some conversations with the construction managers, including the owner, regarding some of those concerns and what we're going to look at for the future for some expectations as, we have kids on campus. We've had some conversations with the group before about, as we get closer to school, the school will be paid closer and closer attention to there, especially when students get on campus. And we had that conversation again. So I think our message has been delivered there. And if you look around, there's some much better attention to some of the safety measures that were a concern from last week. Outside of that, the project is moving forward. Most of the work is now shifted to second shift now, which will be around 2:30, 3 o'clock after students leave. to around 10 or 9, depending on whether it's outside or inside. We still do have some day work going on with roofs up front and some of the air handlers on some of the roofs. But at this point, construction workers are separated from school personnel, and will remain that way until we get into, for breaks, we'll come in and do some pieces. Next major benchmark for the project is on the new addition in the back. That idea that Christmas time is when that needs to be done. So we've been having conversations there already. I've also asked the group for to put together a new calendar for this phase of the year. We've had a lot of kind of pacing for what the summer was going to look like in the summer months, what jobs were going to be done when. But with the interior of the school, I asked for us to have another one in place so we knew where breaks were going to be and where all that coordination pieces were going to go. And so they have that as well to work on. So we have an idea of our coordination efforts between with the school operations and the construction operation. The playground is a hit. Let's do there, and it's not for there. That's there. I don't know if you've noticed when you walked in, but they've begun the coating, the painting for the courts, the basketball court and the tennis court. Those are the new standard colors that are going down in place. So those should be wrapped up here not too long of a time, and the project continues to move forward.
You had mentioned in passing that there was some additional concerns with the chimneys and.
Yes, thank you. When we did the initial part of the project and looked at knowing we would need some masonry work taken care of, most of that look wasn't done in person. We got a drone up there, and we looked around with the drone. Both the architects did. We actually had a neighbor who wanted an excuse to fly his drone and said, hey, we could use some pictures of some chimneys for there. But once we got up and looked at it, the deterioration is worse than we had anticipated when we first thought, which happens. So in that, I had a brief conversation with the architect about actually having a change order to change over, to basically increase the work that we're doing onto the chimneys, rather than have that taken out of contingency funds, so we don't drain those contingency funds out for other issues that come up, but rather put it into the project for the increased rebuilding of whatever chimneys we may need to do, or the tearing down. So it's going to be a little bit more intensive work than we thought. I haven't heard, there's still conversations going on, I haven't heard any updates since then, but as we approach the colder months, that masonry work is going to kind of dissipate and start up next school year. So it may be something that's going to be tagged on to next summer for some of the rest of the chimney work. So just so the board's aware, we try to stay away from change orders, but in this case, it may work to our benefit to actually do that.
So I have a question. Have we been affected because of the pandemic? I just know cost of materials. I know the companies budgeted prior and got quotes prior, but now getting supplies, I just know everything has gone through the roof.
There have been some delays in some orders to there. Nothing that couldn't be managed. So, for example, the playground. When we looked at actually a district purchase and a district order. So we put into place. We figured out when the time was going to be, and then we scheduled out for that time to hit. And actually, in that case, it was the tropical storm that delayed things by a week. So we planned lead times to make that happen. Some of the items are just, we just know are going to be slower than anticipated, but some things aren't. So it's not really consistent.
But I think what Jackie was saying, price-wise.
Cost-wise?
We're
I
locked
mean, as
in.
far as we are, but I was just wondering, a lot of companies have bid out this and now can't afford to build because supplies are.
Right. Nothing's been brought to my attention about the costing going beyond what we've already built into the scale to there. We're not using a lot of lumber. I know lumber is one of those things that really went through the roof. But all our framework is actually metal. For studs, like the superintendent's office, that's a metal studded location. But nothing's really been brought to the attention of the costing's really gone far beyond what we had anticipated.
Yeah, just one other, the corner where the generator is going to go, that's been open for a while. Is that because we're having trouble getting the generator?
Nope. There was some conduit work that needed to happen in that space, and with it done, they're planning on backfilling that in this week.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So It was just getting, my understanding is getting all the conduit in and everything settled, and then the crew's back in to backfill it. So they put the pad down and put the generator on.
And I noticed that they're using a lot of snow fence versus like chain link fence. Is there a reasoning for that, or just
Nothing that's been explained to me other than probably cost.
safety wise
Right.
and concern? It's concerning that, you know, that the snow fence is easy for somebody to climb over or push over, or, and then, you know, if you drive by, like, for example, Cumbies and Greenwich, like, that is all chain linked in, that is all closed off, it's a construction zone. It was just a curiosity question.
Yeah.
I just concerned about
No.
safety of kids.
There hasn't ever been any explanation why snow fence and the other than the amount. You know, the amount of fence that we have out there, and I'm taking a guess at it being a costing issue.
But it
So
is
it
in
doesn't
the
become a
uniform
safety
code
issue, yeah.
that it be
I can raise
securely fenced.
I can raise the question with the construction managers on why this fence versus not a other fence, and get the answer to you.
Okay,
That
because
would be good.
materials and work areas are supposed to be
Secured.
fenced and held secure. And that is in, that came right from the state
OSHA.
education department, and OSHA. So we want to make sure that it's safe for kids out there.
Okay. I'll forward the question.
Bob, any questions?
No, I don't think well, I guess, my audio cut out there for a moment, but, so Dave may have already answered this, but, just as far as, delays in the project, are there delays or anything with, supply chain issues?
Some in, I started there, Bob. That's okay.
Okay, no, don't repeat it. If you said it, don't repeat it. That's fine.
The short version is there have been some.
Okay, no, I just heard that around town that there were, and I hadn't heard it through official channels, so I was just curious.
Yeah.
But no, if you said it, don't waste any more time on it.
Okay.
They go crazy.
So is there any other questions? Okay, all right, so thank you for that, and we will look forward to hearing what they have to say about secure fencing, because it's just as the increased use of the grounds, we should make sure that everything is safe. Okay, one of the next one is a conversation about how to move forward with dealing with the budget possible shortfalls.
Right. So, board you have in front of you, Bob you don't. I guess I didn't realize Bob wasn't going to be here tonight. So I'm going to pop up on the screen, if it lets me, Dan. It should. It has me listed as co-host. I'm going to try to share something so everyone can see it. Dramatic pause. Okay. Okay, so everyone should see a very exciting chart that's there. So at the last board meeting, we talked. There was conversations about, reduction versus elimination. Kind of conversations about what happens if we were to go to remote, and then there was questions up too about transportation and where some savings may be able to come from there. So, given that we are literally in the first week of school, here is kind of the first blush. This is not the full answer yet, but at least give some direction and idea of what some of these moves might be able to do for us. So, what you're looking at the screen is where the different areas of possibility. The reduction is if we were just to reduce that without changing our instructional setting at all. The remote is if we were to move to remote, what we might be able to do just with the remote move, and then just some notes as to what those items are. The reduction in remote columns can be taken separately or together. Okay, so there is an overlap to there. So when we're looking at any possibilities of reductions, the first item up there we're already looking at. That's sharing, the sharing of some services. We are still working with BOCES to try to see where they are in the process and sharing that spot. I had a conversation with Mr. Silvernail earlier this week, and he was going to try to push the issue a little bit because it has been, a couple months since we've gotten anywhere with that. This is still the anticipated number. It's the same number that we anticipated with sharing with the transportation director. So we just don't have the solids yet, so we're just going to maintain this number for now.
Does that include the benefits too?
Yeah. So that's where we sit. It may not be fully accurate, but in the sharing of, that's the one place where a reduction could take place. At one point, from the tiered list, it was used as an example about what about if we reduced out AP classes. AP classes, of course, is academic. They are in classes now. But it is not, the kids who are in their AP classes aren't going to have a diploma concern. Does that make sense? So if they don't do AP US History and do Regents US History, they're still going to be able to move forward to get their diploma. We're just missing out on the AP opportunity, as an example. And so those are the AP examples that are listed there in place. From there's some teaching positions listed that are more onto the remote side of things. And from below that, you can see down the list for the rest of there, to the athletics, which we need to talk about specifically tonight, and then the extracurricular pieces that fall to there. So to the pieces that we look at, if it ends up being a reduction, the reduction piece would be an estimated $230,565, whereas the first blush at the remote is $196,715. So there's savings to be had in either of those categories. On the remote side, we haven't done the full tear down look at what a remote move would look like. Since we have kids in classes now and we've started, we need to actually go in at a very granular level and look at where each of these kids are for who needs what for graduation and who needs what for the courses and for their diploma requirements. And that's going to take a little bit more than doing the reduction in advance. So that if the move to remote is still an area of interest that the board wants to look at as a cost savings measure, we'll continue to look in and to do that work. But we're going to have to get right into the grind to really kid to kid to make sure we don't have any students that are missing out or negatively impacting their graduation opportunities. Go ahead.
So if we, looking at that remote category, is that talking about reducing the service too as well? I mean,
For which one, for example? Pick one for me, Ann.
well, you've got teaching. Let's see, like the business mid-year. I'm not really sure I understand.
Okay.
What you mean that we can save $32,000 if we do business mid-year remote?
So-
I'm not sure exactly.
So if we were to say, okay, we're going to move to a remote section, we may have kids in those classes that need at least to have credit to go toward their diploma pieces. So we wouldn't want to reduce that until we could get the kids that have credit that they might need, or be able to make other arrangements to get students the credit that they need and whatever course might be taught into there. So to allow for some time for that when we move to remote, we would make that reduction mid-year rather than immediately.
So I guess so with these columns, the reduction and the remote would occur together,
They can be together or they can be separate.
So when you say reduction, the AP classes, we would reduce those as opposed to going remote.
Right.
Where the business, we would transition to remote.
Right.
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 Just-
Now,
But if we were to go remote, we would still have the AP classes?
we could, both the columns aren't redundant. So if we wanted to go remote and say we don't want to do the AP classes any longer, we could do that.
Then that would be the same amounts as if you were to reduce it.
Right.
You just took
So,
So you combine those two columns.
Right.
Those
Right.
two totals.
so if we went remote and reduced out some of those items, combining those two totals together gets you, to that $400,000 range.
And you're meaning remote by like specific classes would go remote?
No, we're talking 7 through 12.
Okay.
But this is, the remote piece isn't the full,
No, that's fine, I just wanna make sure I
the full
understand.
piece of it yet, because of that level of granularity that we have to get into. We have to look at what programs we need to do. So if we said, no, we want to keep students in, that going remote is not something we want to do, but we do need to do some reductions into there, we could take that reduction column and go, okay, we could do those things, as an example. If we wanted to go remote, but wanted to keep AP classes, we could say, okay, going remote, we can make these adjustments and keep the AP classes into place. Or we could say both. We could say we're going to go remote, so we're going to make these, because we go remote, we believe we can make these reductions, plus we're going to reduce offerings to the students, and that's what these reductions look like.
So if we were to do remote and the reductions, those two total, you'd have to add those two
You
together.
add those two numbers together, which gets you to about 425,000.
Okay, so is the buildings and grounds unclear that the number that you have there is $43,000? Is that a reduction or is that gonna be our actual cost?
That's the anticipated reduction amount.
The reduction?
That's the saving. These are all savings numbers.
So we've already discussed what the salary would be between Cambridge and us as far as sharing goes.
There hasn't been a straight conversation to it. We're just carrying, this is the same number that we anticipated saving when we were doing the transportation and grounds fees. But when we figure, what would we figure? When our last buildings and grounds position benefits in total was over 100. So I'm just throwing numbers out here. These aren't anyone's real numbers, okay? So you figure, Cambridge pays a certain amount and we pay a certain amount, and say that a grand total ends up being $120,000 for soup to nuts for everything. We end up paying half of that, that's 60. We were paying 100 before, and that lands at about 40, I'm sorry.
Can you reshare the chart? It's not showing up.
Yeah, Bob, I'm working on getting it to you, that's up there. I can share it just in a minute.
I think probably other viewers will benefit from it as well. So.
Yep, understand.
So when it was up here before, not everybody could see it?
No, they could, but.
Nope.
It came
something's
down.
Over.
Oh, it's down now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
clicked an X rather than a move.
So how many AP courses does this encompass?
We had 8 AP courses in total.
So this would
Does
be
that represent
4.
all of them?
Yes.
So we have 8, but there's only 4 listed.
No, they're all in there. Because in some areas, like in social studies, for example, there are 3 AP courses in the social studies department.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's
So-
no way to tell.
So
Yeah,
one
you would-
interjection is I mean we're kind of into the nitty gritty a little bit here, and philosophically I guess one philosophy that I've developed in the past week is that looking at those APs, anything we're thinking about, I feel like this impacts seniors more because this is their last chance at stuff. So if there was stuff that impacted seniors less, now I'm not sure with AP classes kind of when people tend to take them, but if we were going to pick and choose a bit, with any of these decisions, I think that at least in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking of, okay, what could we do to impact seniors less? Because other students could reasonably have a chance to recuperate some of what we may take away. So anyway, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, of the AP coursework, I want to say, Julie, you can jump in here if my memory isn't working quite right. Of the 8 courses, I think bio tends to be senior heavy. One of the English courses is a senior in there, and Psych, AP Psych tends to be a senior elective, but that's more mixed. There's sometimes juniors in it. AP US History and I want to say the language one are tend to be juniors, and the AP World is a sophomore class. Julie, how did I do?
I think that was pretty close. I know the AP Spanish could have some seniors in it, to my knowledge. I just want to make sure I'm on. You can hear me, correct? Okay. I think the other, so yes, there is a mix of AP classes that are for juniors and or seniors. So we could look at not impacting the senior AP classes. That would reduce the savings a bit. The other pieces, and I'm not sure if this is where you were going, Dr. Sklowski, but just were you talking about other classes for underclassmen in general? Not sure if that was what you were thinking, but a lot of those fulfill elective requirements, and sometimes those are mixed. So if we might have other elective courses that weren't for seniors, we could take a look at that. I think it would be difficult to cut those because sometimes they're associated with a certain grade level. So that's how they're built in the schedule. It'll be harder for them to take them again. We could look at that. But again, those fulfill some elective requirements, and we wouldn't necessarily be able to recoup those, especially for an 11th grader, depending on if they're on track or not with their credits. So we would just have to, it would take some time to really go through those other elective courses and look at the enrollment and what the requirements were. I think, again, not to pick on AP classes, but that those classes, we can look at those and they don't affect graduation requirements. Obviously, they affect other opportunities for students that we want to give them, but we can transition students to the Regents level courses and not impact anybody being on track for graduation. So that's why we first looked at those.
Okay, no, yeah, I guess I mostly was just trying to back up to about 30,000 feet and look at another, just introduce another constraint that was just for the simple reason that if there's an opportunity for underclassmen to make up what they may miss, then I'd rather not remove the opportunities from seniors where possible.
And point taken, and we will, I will work with Mr. Zarzicki, and we will take a look and see if there are any possibilities there.
Thank you. I think it's important to acknowledge, it's a little awkward to be here at this point in the year. We've already started the year to have this conversation. We obviously were hoping throughout the summer and until now that there'd be some federal funding, that the New York State would restore our state aid. So just obviously for all our listeners, that our intention was never to wait this long, and I guess we haven't decided what direction we're headed yet, but we're in a tough spot budget wise. So.
So these numbers that you have here, they only reflect reductions at the high school?
Yes. There are actually no.
There's an elementary.
There is some elementary in there.
School counseling.
Music.
But there's no dollar amounts there.
For under the specials piece, there isn't.
And there isn't under school counselor either.
Okay. That number is, that number must got, I'll re-edit it and get it back out. Basically that number is half of what the counselor's position would have been, and I can give you that in a second. I can get to it, but I'm sharing my screen, so I have to get to places that aren't.
And when we say BOCES are,
It's a shared BOCES
right now,
position.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so that spot would be an estimate number.
For eliminating?
Yeah.
Is that eliminating it?
Yeah, regs allow for at the elementary level, as you know, art, music, those things to be taught in the classroom under the direction of or with assistance with a certified individual. So that would be a place where we could actually eliminate pieces. It does create other challenges though, because we use our specials to allow our regular classroom teachers to have their planning time. And we right now have teachers doing recess in there, so that's another spot with the switchover that's created some. So we start cramping up our contractual obligations a little bit if we move too much.
No, I see that, but are we offering things after school? Are we offering a late bus run, or are there things going on in the school, after the regular school day ends?
At this point, there is no after-school run. We haven't done it, and said we're not going to do anything in September. Part of that is athletically related for what we were thinking, what was going to happen with athletics. The other part of that, hold on, is it's really budgetary of, when we look at our extracurriculars, it's what do we try to keep, what do we try not to? The number that's listed here, that $25,000 number, does retain some items into the budget. If you can look on your screens for when I shared, it will show that to you. It keeps the 11th and 12th grade advisors, because that's part of prom and after prom and graduation. National Honor Society, the 6th grade play, in the event that things change before we get there, because that's a springtime activity. Doesn't guarantee it's going to happen, but I'd hate to cut it now and then be able to do it in March or in April. Keeps band, chorus, jazz band, FFA. It does maintain the school webmaster and tech support. Those are our internal pieces. Because with the amount of technology that we're doing, having on-staff help is helpful in the times where we can't get the technical help from our BOCES folks into place. And then maintaining yearbook prom, again, prom in the event that we're able to, have prom.
Nothing different from what you had already provided for us, as far as.
Yeah, that's the same basic, for the extracurriculars, it's that same basic approach. And there's some adjustment to the home. We have a home coordinator for our fall and winter athletics. That would adjust some, because if we don't have fall athletics, then we don't need a coordinator. But yes, it is the same approaches that we had spoken of before.
So what's the timeline for decision?
The board tells me what direction we want to go, and we start moving toward that direction. I would really like to see if the federal funds are really going to come out. Our next opportunity, and probably our last opportunity, is the October 1st funding bill from the federal government. It's the continuation appropriations bill. It should be coming out before then. Since we haven't had a budget in 13 years at the federal government level, there's a possibility that some type of an appropriation gets slid into that bill for money directly to schools. And the advocacy work that our regional superintendent BOCES, the superintendents have been doing, there's been some indication that they're going to try to get money directly to schools through that appropriation bill, if they get it done by October. If they don't get it done by October, or we don't see anything else for any funds, then I think we really need to act. Our challenge is the longer we wait, the less effective, financially speaking, that any reductions or eliminations or changes do, because we've already spent the money. The other part here is if we end up, timelines could change. If we end up being told we have to go remote in 2 weeks and have to stay that way, I think we can make some of those remote changes faster, because the situation would have changed and then we could adapt to what the new situation is. The challenge in that is, if hypothetical numbers here, right? So mid-October they say you have to be remote, and then back in April they say, okay, everyone has to be back in school again. So then it ends, then we end up having kind of the opposite issue, whether we have enough people here to run, to run school with an in-person approach. But I would say October is our date.
Now, does the reduction and or the remote, do they get us to where we need to be, or do we need to be lower than both of those numbers? Where do we, I guess what I'm asking is where do we need to be to make it all?
Well,
What's the magic number?
fair question. We officially don't have a magic number, right? All we know is that the state says it's going to continue to withhold at least 20% of any revenue that it's giving to municipalities, including schools, until federal funding comes in or something else happens in the revenue stream. Our 20% number is $1.4 million. So in that 1.4 million, it's how much of that do we want it to be, reduction, elimination to there? How much of that do we want it to fill in with fund balance as for a balance piece, or where do we want to fall in that kind of mix between how much is going to be a reduction versus how much is the fund balance, and where are we comfortable knowing that next year we're going to have a similar issue, hopefully with more secure numbers to work with, which was why I tend to lead more cuts earlier. It tends to be my philosophy toward things. That way you get your expenditures down faster, and it's an easier number to work with in successive years when the budgets continue to be bad. But we don't have an official hard number. That's it. But 1.4 is that 20%. That's the big number we talked about back last spring.
So you really don't think that there's any possibility that there will be action in New York State at the state level to meet the commitment that they've made, whether they borrow the money themselves and they figure out a way to make the pain go over a few years, several years?
Yep.
You don't.
I don't. I was just watching today. There was a news thing through Spectrum News, through the cable news there. And Susan Arbiter was talking with David Little, the executive director for the Rural Schools Association. And in that interview, they were talking about there's no conversation out of the state about borrowing anything. Not talking about using the state reserves to fill anything in. Not talking about any greater reduction to non-constitutionally mandated items. Education is a constitutionally mandated requirement, but no conversations about that. I haven't heard any conversations about any adjustment to how the cut is made. So right now we're told it's a flat 20%. So everyone's getting the same 20%, regardless if you are, whether you're a really wealthy school district or municipality, or whether you're average, or whether you're really poor. So that 20% cut ends up being regressive because it impacts, of course, the poor. We're just below the average mark to us. So the lower schools will get more help than we do, but in theory we shouldn't get as much help as those more wealthy schools are. And there's been no talk of adjustment. Now they may be doing it behind the scenes and just not telling anybody, but we're just not getting any information. It's all being controlled by the governor's office, and they're not sharing a lot of information.
Not making it easy.
No, they're not.
Dave, at one point we talked about the difference between the GSPS and the legislative run and aid run, and it was like 311,000.
Yeah.
And so at this point, then the 20% of that also is being held, right? I think that difference was like high cost aid, excess cost, hardware and technology, high tax aid, and library and textbooks or something. And
Yeah.
I think my understanding is that also is being held at 20% of that's being held as well.
Yeah, Bob, I haven't seen anything to indicate that isn't being impacted as well, that those categorical aids are getting hit. Karen's shaking her head here over a bit too, because what she's heard from the auditors is that it's all aid now. It's not just those general support funding that was originally listed on the Department of Budget that I had shared before. It's everything. And I'm hearing it's not just us. It's the town is going through the similar.
I had another question, and this may just be a learnable moment for me. It's probably water under the bridge, but last month we voted to keep our 4% and give the rest of that fund balance back to taxpayers. If looking back into June, would there have been any way to, through contracts, prepay stuff or not give that money back? What would be the consequences of not giving that money back?
Like, Karen,
What would have been?
It's illegal to prepay anything.
So schools don't do it?
You're not allowed to.
You can't.
Trust me, I tried.
It's illegal.
My understanding is actually there's quite a few schools that that have done that. I guess that there's state ed has a website that lists those, but I guess I didn't really know what the consequences would be for them, just because it was. And I was just curious whether we could have used that money in some way productively.
We've even tried to encumber funds and roll them over to the next year with our new auditors, Martin and Company. They won't even let us do that. We have to approve it as a payable and recognize it in the prior year and then pay it the following year. But you can't pay for upcoming expenses and not recognize it in the year that you're paying it.
Or what about put it into a restricted reserve, and right, because we actually can, we legally can use our reserves, right? Need to pay them back within 5 years with a reasonable interest. But in future, if this were to happen, would we be able to do that with that fund balance?
Well, you can always fund your reserves with the board authorization, yes.
Yeah, and Bob, there was just recent passage allowing for the use of those reserves. I think it's for COVID-related items, and it is that the repayment of 5 years or 20% over 5 years is the minimum payment. You can pay it back faster if you want, but that is available for need if needed. But I think it was related to just COVID funds. It wasn't the COVID issues. So if we had to buy like the scanners, for example, so we needed $10,000, we could grab the $10,000 from the reserve and then pay that reserve back, if I understand it correctly.
And we keep that reasonable interest, right? I mean, it's when we borrow from ourselves and pay ourselves back with reasonable interest, we also keep that interest then goes into that reserve.
The interest, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, in a way, it's like getting a loan, except you get to keep the interest. So okay. Just because, if we look at the revenue side, I mean, there's, and I guess I don't have a good handle on, I mean, I don't like the idea of blowing through reserves, but on the other hand, I don't have a good handle on, it's a good chunk of money, but are those reserves funded at at excessively not enough, a reasonable amount? Obviously, probably often a little bit more is better, but I guess I don't have a good handle of what percent of those we use in a year, or in in an average year in a 10-year span or something.
Right, and that Deb spoke to that at our audit meeting last year when we wrapped up the fiscal year, and she spoke to the fact that our reserves were funded right where they should be. In fact, in the prior year, we would move funds to where it was appropriate, based on not overfunding a reserve. Our reserves are not overfunded.
So from your perspective then, Karen, we should be looking at limiting expenses and not creating revenue through reserves?
In my opinion, yes, because then you're banking on, as Dr. Glover said, paying back 20% every year. What happens if next year's like this, and how can you pay back 20% when we can't even balance this budget?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, one of the things. No, it's a good point. One of the things that that had occurred to me was that if we were to borrow from reserves, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of it at all. I mean, I'm not, but it's not my first choice. But it will, I guess trying to piece together a number of different things here for something that can work. And so, are there expenses we can reduce, and then also, can we create some revenue? It would be one way to kick the can down the road, so that we would, if we were to get, or if New York State were to get federal funding, or that also then the voters could, some of this could be put to the voters next year on the budget that we ask for. And and I'm not saying I'm in favor of that, but I think we need to be looking at all our options here and putting all these tools on the table to say, okay, which lever do we pull to figure this out? And that would be a way to further kick the can down the road with the hope of getting more money, but also then we could put it to the voters, and then next year some of the reductions wouldn't necessarily have to happen this year. They could happen next year. If there weren't federal funds to New York, then increase state aid to us, and the voters told us no, or some combination of those. So, and I'm not arguing in favor of that. I just think that just like I had argued last meeting that going remote, I think it needs to be on the table just so we can see what those numbers look like, right? Because we kind of need to know where the goalposts are, and then know which levers we can pull to get there.
Right, and I think since I won't be here, you'll have to ask Dr. Glover to look into that pulling of reserves a little closer, because if it is just for COVID-related expenses, that is not a huge amount that we're talking about, so that wouldn't fill in this gap a lot. I mean, yes, it would help, but I would explore that a little more.
So maybe I didn't understand that perfectly, Dr. Glover. So you're saying that only money for COVID-related expenses can be pulled from reserves and then paid back over 5 years?
That's my understanding. I would need to reread it, but the way I read it, that it's you can tap your reserves for COVID-related items. Now, I don't know if they consider a lot of revenue related to the COVID piece or not. I don't know if that's an allowable expense, if you will.
Right.
I would have to look closer at that, and I just marked it down to do that. But my initial understanding of it is that if we needed to buy, additional PPE, if we needed to buy additional equipment, or scanners or supplies, that we could tap into reserves to purchase those, but then having to pay back the reserves for those expenses.
Right, and that wasn't my understanding when I read it, but I have a low level of confidence in that I fully understood it. So that easily could be correct.
Yeah, I had marked down to relook at it just to make sure that I didn't miss something in it. There's been a lot of regulation come out of the state recently, so it's easy that that detail could have been missed. I'll relook.
One of the things that we should do, just to make sure that we're getting all of that foundation aid, is we need a calendar with 180 school days.
Right.
So we really shouldn't wait until January to make that adjustment.
Yep.
People need to plan, and if we're going to be moving calendar days around, we need to do that as well as any other things. So whatever, I know it's a minimum of 180 up to.
Yes.
Yeah, contractually we can go up to 185, but we don't get aid for any more than 180.
But we need to be able to make sure that we
will hit that number before June 26th hits.
All right, well, that's good, but we should let people know what those days are, so it should be reflected in the calendar. I know I wanted to get that first week changed, so I think, just so that we do that. And one of the things also that I thought about afterwards, and I wasn't clear on, is I asked you when we met last when we were doing the cafeteria positions, you said that the cafeteria was 5 days because they would be preparing food.
Yep.
I'm not sure I understand exactly how we're going to get food to people on a day when we don't have any students or any buses to get it out. So are people coming to pick food up? Is that
yes? For folks who are fully remote, or for folks for students who are here in person, for those days they're not off, if they say yes, we want that, we're giving the food to them as they walk out the door. So they'll have those days. But folks who are remote or have a change of heart, they change their mind, we're asking them to come to the school to pick it up.
Okay.
We couldn't do that on Thursday and not
Thursday?
have a pickup Friday, like do a double pickup Thursday?
We might be able to.
I mean,
I think we did that didn't we at one point go to 4 days?
Yeah.
Yeah, in spring we went to 4 days. The difference being is we had a lot more manpower working on it than we do now. I mean that's.
Well, we replaced the two and we extended the
Yeah,
hours.
so we also had
AIDS.
we had the aid corps as helping out, and we had the transportation for the yeah. So basically, most of our non-instructional, most of our support staff was really dedicated to the food program.
All right, so I'm still, I've got to work on this virtual as opposed to in person. The numbers,
Yeah, we have.
I'm not clear on.
Yeah, and admittedly, so we still have work to do on it too. But it's a cable net sweater. It's very integrated. It's a king of a little bit of a web that we have to get through. But the kind of the purpose behind this is, the question too is, can we exact some savings if we go remotely? The answer is yes, and it looks like it could be a decent dollar amount. But where that exact dollar amount falls, we're not exactly sure yet.
That would help us as well, even if at some point we were forced to go remote. That would, I think that's not wasted time to figure that out, because if we're forced to go remote in the next 4 weeks or 5 weeks, then that's some it's a good number to know.
So Ms. Adams said that you were looking at the AP classes because they did not interrupt anybody's or cause any disruption in the pathway to graduation.
Correct.
Are the other things required or not? I'm just wondering what the rationale was for putting some of the things on the table.
Most of just looking down the list, the buildings and grounds is a supervisory spot. The cleaner is a non-instructional position. Business has to do with the number of students impacted that are there, for the number of kids that are in that program, and what we might be able to do to move them to other places so those students won't get impacted negatively. When we're looking at the reading teacher possibility, that is there are other ways that we can accomplish the EIS support that teacher provides. So are you suggesting that there should be numbers there as well? Yeah.
Missing numbers.
I don't know why those numbers aren't there. The AP classes, we'll update it. When I update it, I'll get it to the board and I'll post it to the site so folks can see it too.
Yes, I should see it because
Yeah.
we're discussing it, so
Yeah,
they should see it.
absolutely. So the AP courses we talked about, we know that's not going to impact a diploma. Those other teaching spots are one's related to the AP classes, the first item. The second is, really to the remote piece. If we went remotely, that we would be able to do music differently. Same with physical education, we'd be able to do that differently. For the counseling pieces, we would be able to do, that would adjust because we wouldn't have students on campus. So with the work that we would want to do for counseling, most of it, all the high school pieces of it would be remote. So that diminishes the amount of work in class or in school pieces that we might need to do in service in school, but still be able to reach folks remotely. So that's where's the thought behind there. For the next teaching position in place, that's again, it's AIS at the elementary that we may be able to do differently, so we don't necessarily lose the service, but we're doing it differently to reach those students. Elementary art is the possibility of eliminating elementary art, and then athletics and extracurricular, though there's opportunities for kids to do after school and they're important, but in a remote setting they can become more difficult. And if we're looking at our academics, I think we really need to look at those first.
Okay, but it's hard to know because we're missing
numbers.
Yep, I will. Yes, when I shifted and set numbers over, I lost something in a column. We'll get the numbers re-put in and I'll get it out and I'll repost it.
And the social work, we're talking about if remote, is this taking the position out altogether?
No, that's a reduction.
Okay.
Let's do it part-time.
Dave, can you expand that? If you can just go the Excel, if you can just go to view and then zoom in a little bit on that part of it. It's so small for me to see on my screen.
That better?
Yep. Yeah, there it is. Now you can see it. Thank you.
Here, hold on. I did one more. That better?
Yep. Does it just scroll up? I can only see up to, or maybe that's high enough. Maybe that's as high as it goes. Up to row.
As far as I go.
Okay, yeah, I can see it now. I could only see up to about row 6 before.
Oh, sorry.
And so the music and the PE affects, there's a high school, these are predominantly high school.
There would be as a result of the high school. So on the music side, for example. So when we're looking at when we're looking at the department.
I'm not asking particularly, I'm
Yeah,
just
I know.
asking where you're planning
Yeah.
on cutting the
Right,
the
but
services.
what I'm trying to relay is that sometimes an impact from the high school, because we share teachers
Mhm.
between, sometimes would impact the elementary school rather than the high school.
It'd be elementary. Am I right? I mean,
Right.
like, there's a requirement for 7th and 8th graders, they have to take at least one music class, where like in elementary, it's
Right.
not mandated. It could be provided by the classroom teacher.
And
So you may reduce
Right,
the
so
amount
it
of
would be, that would affect elementary.
right. The other piece in here, which we aren't getting into, which is why you don't see some of the other details, is you get to Lee Senior and whatever that area is. Because so
seniority.
you know, so
I understand that, I
yeah.
just didn't know whose program was being affected,
Yeah.
because it's just, you know, we're looking at pre-K through 12.
Right.
And that the top end is mostly high school, and there's no delineation as to, I mean, you do at the bottom, you do have 2 elementaries, but I was just trying to understand exactly what programs you were looking at. Thank you. Okay. So we don't have all of the information yet, so we're still a work in progress. So is there anything else that people want to start looking at or ask for more questions about?
One real
Or-
quick question I had, and I'm not sure that the juice is worth the squeeze on this, but leased buses, if we were to return, we still have we haven't gotten rid of the older buses, right? Remind me what those lease payments are this year, and whether we think that would actually be a cost savings. Because if that hadn't been approved by the voters, we would have been stuck with those older buses anyway. So, just curious if there was any value in looking at that.
looking at what
Returning
not
the
leasing
leased-
buses.
Returning the leased buses.
I'm not even sure if that's a possibility. I'd have to look at it.
I don't think it's possible to sign the lease agreement.
Yeah, I think we're.
Yeah, I don't know what the breakage of terms on a lease agreement would be.
And would we have buses that would be able to cover that if we
Well,
did?
that's-
Well, we're short one.
We're short one now.
We're short one currently. I'll see if I can take a peek. I know there has to be an end cost to it for the state, but I don't know when you sign a lease through on a state contract, what that means. I just don't know that answer. I'll have to look into it.
But keep in mind that 2 buses that we still have got, they're on here to surplus because they're getting to the point they won't pass DOT.
Yeah.
So then we won't be able to use them anyways.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so, and like you said, we have another one.
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's best case scenario, but I mean, if that hadn't passed, we'd be in that situation if the voters hadn't approved those buses, and so it just if there's and I guess I don't know what savings would be, even if it's possible, but I don't think it would take a huge amount to answer those questions.
The lease payment is about $15,000 on both buses
Combined.
combined.
And then on top of that,
Pretty small
there's
number.
I think,
Yeah,
it's 80% on our,
It's 80.
of aid on top of that 15%. So what our annual outlay for that may be is probably cheaper than what our breakage might be on a lease.
Yep, and also then probably additional repair costs on the old buses. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smoky brakes.
Fiery brakes.
Fiery brakes.
Fiery brakes.
It was a hot ride.
Any other?
Glad you all find it funny.
You have to laugh, otherwise you find it stressful. Like, this has been
I
that
lost
kind
a
of
little
week.
more hair on that one.
Thankfully, nobody was hurt.
Yes,
It
we
was
are-
maintained.
We are very thankful that that was the case.
Any other questions or concerns as we move forward? So if you're thinking
No.
that October is,
Yeah,
get
I
really
think
serious
it's there.
about
We'll
looking at-
continue, now, Gordon, I just want to make sure you understand, I know this isn't the full information. Just remember 5 days between our meetings. one of the toughest school years to get started on record ever to there. So it was, what can we get you to point you in a direction to give you an idea of where we might want to lean? So I know this isn't the full information that's there. We'll keep working on the what if on the 7 through 12 for going the remote piece to there. We'll pull those strings out and see what it looks like, and we'll have something fuller for you. But if we were to go through the exercise and have the remote here, and it was going to save us $19,000, it might be okay. This route isn't going to be enough to get us there. But when we're looking at almost 200, it might be. So we'll keep pulling at that string to go, and then because the shuffleboard is going to get complicated as we start moving between programs and trying to make it to work in a non-remote piece. We'll keep working there. I do think October is kind of our drop dead to do something, because if we get federal money,
which is your deadline,
yeah.
and that's what I said is if October is going to be our deadline,
Yep.
we need to be very serious about
Yep.
having all of these numbers complete and
Yep.
a priority list identified. So I know this isn't complete, but
Yep.
you're saying October,
yes,
so
October.
that is
Yeah.
your self-imposed deadline. So
hopefully
That's 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, in 2 weeks, if 70 billion comes through in that appropriations bill, and that's $400,000 for Salem, now we only have $1 million to worry about, and from there, so that it could change things or make things worse.
Okay,
But we'll see.
we'll keep plugging away at it.
We will.
So,
Thank you.
Great.
Is it any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right, moving on, number 6 on the agenda is business affairs. There's a budget transfer. Do we have a motion to approve the attached budget transfer?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or concerns about the transfer?
No.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Next one is the resolution authorizing the master lease purchase agreement. Entertain a motion to approve the attached resolution authorizing the master lease purchase agreement.
Second.
Was that you?
Me.
Oh,
It's Jackie and me.
sorry.
I see.
I wasn't looking out, guys.
Come on, Dan, get in the minutes, Dan.
Karen, would you just give everybody just a brief overview of that, just so that everybody's clear on what that
Absolutely,
agreement
this is the resolution for the EPC project for the funding, and we got the funding at 2.62% locked-in rate for the term of the note, so it was a very good outcome on that.
Any discussion or questions for Karen?
Good, thank you, Karen.
Yes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Okay, good. Maybe some happy notes. Instructional affairs. Ms. Vieira, is she?
Yep.
There she is. Hi, Karen. She's muted though. There she goes.
Yeah, I got it. I had to find the button. So, news and notes, not a ton of stuff, as it's all been about the opening of the school, which is pretty good. I'd like to say, first of all, we're up to 302 students, which is pretty exciting. Our first day, it really went a lot smoother than we thought it was going to be. Our biggest thing that I was most concerned with was getting all those kids in the morning and the transition coming in different ways. And today was day 3, and we're pretty much on regular time already. Getting them in, there wasn't much lag. It went really well. The kids seem to be happy. I keep hearing that, they're really enjoying their time here. I think so many of them just wanted to see each other, and you can see the excitement with the teachers as well. One of the big things that I've been doing that's been a little different is I have been doing videos in the morning rather than doing announcements, because now we're kind of scattered throughout the building. So rather than trying to reconnect to the right phones and get the, the announcements done that way. I've just been recording videos that I share with the teachers in the morning. But the nice thing is that they can then share that with their remote kids, the kids who aren't here on that day, so they still get the same message every day. And the goal is to choose some of our students that were on student council last year and start having them come in and recording them to do the daily announcements and sharing them that way. So it's just a new idea, and it seems to be well received. And yeah, otherwise it's really been a great week so far, and it just feels good to have everybody back on campus. Even though it's limited, I'll take it. And that's about it for me, So if you have any questions, feel free.
Questions? Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Adams?
Good evening again. Same thing, not a lot of formal reporting to do. We have had a great first week. So we've had 2 first days. So we felt it was a little bit like Groundhog Day today because we had our first day for purple students on Monday. And today was our first day for our gold team. Overall went very well. We've had a very smooth opening. I mean, we've had some little bumps in the road, but I just want to say I'm just overwhelmed and amazed at just what our team can do. I think we just have the amazing faculty and staff here at the high school. The planning, I think all were very happy to see such a smooth opening, and it was great to see our students. They also, we would like to thank them and our families, very flexible during all of this new procedures and protocols. So we've had a really great week. It's nice to see everyone. We kind of got our technology up and going. A lot of this week has been just getting students settled in, familiarizing them with, for those that are in person, in that hybrid model of, what their in-person days will look like, what their remote days will look like, but just the overall adjustment to the block schedule was really impressive for the students. So really happy to report that. I think even though we don't have a lot of items on the report list, I think that just in itself is a huge accomplishment. And I'm just really so proud of everybody and want to thank the faculty and staff and all of our students and families for a great opening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Glover?
Hi. Pretty much the same as both Karen and Julie. Extremely grateful to both Karen and Julie for their efforts and work in leading their respective buildings and getting things to move forward. They did the omens work on the instructional side with their teams and with their teachers and getting everything lined out and schedules set and all that piece lined up. And so a lot of all that instructional work and pieces that are going into place is because of their efforts. So it's very nice work from them in moving forward and get everything running and back and forth. Same with Joe Wilbur out in the bus garage. We're getting the bus drivers ready and the change and how we're going to get folks set up and get out for the routes. And it's been working smoothly back and through the routes and in and out. We get faster every day as we get used to it and as families get used to it. That's there. And the faculty and staff have really stepped up. I mean, really stepped up. They're helping us clean desks because with the cleaning staff, we just don't have enough people. At one point, we needed to get to 14 classrooms in 3 minutes with 4 people. And I said, guys, it's just, our cleaning staff is great. We're not that's too much. So, they've stepped up to help. Our custodial and cleaner staff has done fantastic. We're very we have the schedule set up. We're very regimented in what we need to do in order to hit everything. We're heading everything, even if we have, even with the emergencies that pop up, like, I don't know, a tire fire that comes onto play, we're still able to get those things interjected. We're actually to the spot now on the custodial side where we kind of have a groove on, so we know where our lulls are, so we can start interjecting some of those other pieces of our normal maintenance schedule into play. Now, so we're there already, and we're on day 3. Sanitation for Tuesday night went right off without a hitch. So we got that date between the gold and purple crew. So Friday we'll be ready for that. That shouldn't be an issue at all. With things going into place, and I'm extremely grateful to this community. That morning I had nightmares like I did at graduation, that everyone was going to come to graduation because everyone wants to see the kids. And I was afraid that everyone was just going to show up, and they went through the streaming and did those other things. We've changed the traffic pattern in 3 days, and that's why it's working. It's because everyone's following through the loop, and there. Maybe it's the novelty of, hey, I get to drive through the bus loop now, and they've already told us no. I'm not sure, but it's nice to see everybody when they drive through. You get to smile, wave, and say hi to folks, and the kids get out of the car to there before we get into the hurry of the day. But things are moving forward and moving very well. We went very well for an open. There are some things we need to look at as we get open. There's, well, we didn't think of this, or we didn't think of that, or we thought of it this way, but we may have to change it. So we'll be making changes as we move along. But overall, I'm thrilled with the open. One more day to go. To there for the in-person, and then we have, of course, our 5th day is remote from there. So I'll stop there because we have other things to talk about that include me. So that's unless you have questions, I'm set.
Okay. Anybody questions? Thank you. I don't think there's any. Does anybody have any conference reports? I am scheduled to do some webinars, but those come up later in October. So. I have to follow it from one page to the next. All right, moving on to personnel. Makes me sad, but I'm going to ask to entertain a motion to accept the resignation of Karen McGregor from her position as business manager and district clerk effective September 18, 2020. If we don't do it,
if we don't move on it Tuesday. So moved. Not happily though, I'm just saying.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
We appreciate the 12 years of service that you gave to Salem Central School, and you will be missed on many levels. So good luck and all the best. With that, if there's no objections, I'd like to combine B through F on the personnel list. It would be to appoint Frank Fraunhofer, varsity wrestling coach, Christopher Fraunhofer, co-JV and modified wrestling coach, Sherman Trinkle, co and JV/modified coach wrestling, Mark Eastman, boys varsity basketball, and Jim Perry, girls varsity basketball.
So move.
I think it was me first. Bob gets second.
Second.
Okay, you got it. Any discussion? No? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Fine. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. New business, the surplus disposal, it is 2 buses. Is this, now, if we do this, does that allow them to go up for sale? Is that?
Right, he can either choose to do a sealed bid, or we can, if he has somebody, purchaser in mind, if it's a fair price, either way, it will still come to the board for acceptance.
Entertain a motion to give the superintendent the authority to dispose of the attached items.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. And we did say that we would add at least 3 different things to this particular part of the agenda. The first one was fall sports.
So I just labeled these B, C, and D as discussion items?
Yes, please. And Dr. Glover, what did the section decide today?
They are waiting on our vote.
Oh.
No stress.
No stress. To there, so I'm going to share, Jackie asked for some information on the finances pieces, just so it's up, so you have a chance to look at it while I kind of give you some basics behind here. As we know, athletics was allowed by the state on the 21st, for the start on the 21st of September. To happen. So through that and through the process of that allowance, there's been several conversations at the state level all the way down to the local districts. The state level has determined that there will be no state or regional competition. No championships, so no state titles, no regional titles, none of those pieces. The section, in section 2, hasn't said anything officially about whether having a sectional championship or not having a sectional championship. That's kind of in the air. I think a bunch of us just kind of surmised that if there isn't any regional competition, that sectional competition would be out. There are some challenges with that level of competition based on the regulations that were laid out, at least by the governor.
Distance would become an issue, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, because you're not supposed to play outside of your region, and our section goes all the way out to, out to Sakadaga Lake, and that's in a different region, so we can play those. Actually, North Warren is part of the North Country region, so technically we shouldn't be able to play with that group either, but I haven't heard any conversations to there. So the section moved it down to the leagues, which were part of the Adirondack League. There's about 13 of us that's there. And then after the conversation at the league level, it's come to the schools. And basically is what the league is looking at is, are the schools interested in running sports or not running sports? There is, ignoring finances for a second, okay? To say if money wasn't an issue, it was just the COVID piece, that there are some really good reasons why to have sports, right? There's the mental health and wellness, it's the opportunity for kids, it's the return to some normalcy for all the kids into place. A lot of good reasons for wanting kids to be able to get together and play. Our challenge is there's probably 3 times the challenges over what the benefits are. Health and safety is a huge concern. How do you maintain social distancing? How do you maintain reduce that social density? There are requirements in there where it's only allowed for 2 spectators per game, but you can't go over 50 people either. So 2 spectators per player. So you have those constraints, and then we have the requirement to enforce them, which we would have to have someone be here to do that, which increases our budget to be able to make those things happen. Again, we're ignoring budget, but that ties to it. Now, so there's resources we have to go into, and that's home games. Away games, what we used to be able to fit onto 1 bus, we aren't going to be able to anymore. Football has been moved to the spring, to the fall 2 season. So football isn't an issue at this point. But that would mean likely some of our young men who play football are going to want to play soccer. So that would increase your soccer numbers, and then instead of having maybe 18 kids on a team, 15 to 18 kids is where we tend to carry. Now we're looking at closer to 25, so now we're talking at possibly 2 buses to travel to go to games, to be able to play anyone else within the league. Logistically, there's concerns. Some schools we aren't going to be able to have buses until 4:15. The sun sets quicker in North Warren than it does elsewhere, closer to the North Pole. So you may not get full contests in, because if we can't leave till 4:15, you get there at 5. You're looking at a much shortened time, because we're starting later in the season, in order to actually be able to get games into play, unless you happen to be playing on a lighted field. Into place. We already talked about the transportation concerns that are there. Additionally, it's what type of message does it send during the day, we're asking folks to wear face coverings, we're asking about social distancing, we're going through great efforts to maintain health and safety through a lot of means, and then it's okay not to be that way at a school-sanctioned event when it comes to athletic time to there. And additionally, to hold athletics and then talk about not having extracurriculars is a fairness issue, that for our non-athletic type kids who would want to do the other pieces, we're saying yes to one and not yes to the other. Leads to some issues there as well. I think Don is on. Don, if you have anything to add, if it's okay. Don Zarzicki, that's there. Don, if you have anything you want to add into that, please feel free to do so.
No, you've covered most of the issues. I think the issues amongst ADs, the main concern has been the inequity to students that their sports won't be played or be put off the fall too. And then there's the overriding concern has been the amount of preparation that it's taken us to get to this point in the school year. That, for a few kids to be able to play ball, we may jeopardize the school year, or whatever it was within that. So, but Dr. Glover hit all the points right on the head. That's what's been talked about with ADs and the league.
Now, with the Wasserman League not doing sports, will that impact some games that we would have played anyways?
Yeah, with the Wasserman League, once they decide to pull the plug, we have a shared field hockey program with Wasserman and Adirondack League. So that leaves the Adirondack League with 3 teams, and the bylaws require 4 teams to create a league. So I don't think anyone's actually officially come out and said that, but that's what the bylaws read. And so there would be no field hockey season. And to reach schools to play field hockey, we would have to we'd have to have permission of some sort to get out of our region.
Thank you.
Yep.
The other piece that I'll add to this is, as folks know, we've had 2 school districts in our area have positive COVID cases and have had to go through the whole contact tracing and all that could go into place. And what's been happening is that regardless of all the work that we do here, is that like if there was a student, and this is fictitious, it's just an example. If it was a second grader who had first contact with all this other second graders, that entire class was put into quarantine, along with the teacher, along with the bus driver, along with anyone else who had direct contact with that student. So if we have an athletic contest, field hockey, soccer, whatever it is, and that at the end of the game, everyone's going through and fist bumping or elbow bumping through, and one of those players is COVID positive, we now have all those students, and then first contact, because you don't find out for however long you don't find out for, and then that lag then means we could have an entire school impacted and then have the whole school off and remote. It's not just, in the beginning, the Department of Health was sounding like it would be very kind of localized, and it's not. They're taking that next step out in, if it's this second grader, and maybe that second grader, the schools who went through this shared that if, it happens in the high school, you're probably closing your high school down. Because if the kids crossing the hallway, that you try to social distance, you're still there, but there's still direct contact with that student in the hall, despite our best efforts. And to Don's point, it's that all the work everyone did to get to this spot, and then have our first soccer game, and then be out until January or however long the Department of Health tells us, is kind of hard. Kind of a hard pill to swallow. That's there. The other piece to this, now putting the budget piece back in, is what's on the screen, is what we've shared with you, and it's on the screen currently. That's there. These are estimated costs. The coaching costs are for this year, but for the officials, Jackie has said about how much does it cost per official per game, but that varies depending on the official and from where they come.
I mean, yeah, but there's a certain amount. Like, I know there's a travel cost per mile over, but I mean, it can't exceed a certain amount, right? I mean, roughly it's about $100.
Well, it depends on your coach. The more seasoned coaches are going to get the higher salaries.
I think the official. I'm talking about the official.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're on the same. I just used the wrong word. But for the officials, it depends on which official you get, how many officials you get in the game. where the travel piece is at, so it's not a hard set that this is
I mean,
gonna
it's
be.
about though, so I feel like 1,000 is kind of high because you only pay
Well-
for home games, you don't pay for away games.
We budget in about $12,500 for officials, and that's
In a normal season,
In-
but
in a
this
reg-
would be,
yeah,
I mean,
in a normal
you're
season.
not
Yeah.
sharing during playoffs or anything like
yeah.
that.
So fair enough, that may be a high number.
And supplies and materials, we spend all of this every year.
That is what is off this year's. We haven't spent this yet, but that is what is off our budgeted numbers for this year, guys.
And for, like, even for football, like we
Well-
do, like that, materials and equipment?
We
Yeah.
don't pay for uniforms and helmets and stuff when we share with Cambridge,
You
yes.
don't, or you do?
We do.
We do.
You do.
Oh, we do.
Yeah, the helmet certification, again, not anytime. The helmet certification is costly.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand, I just didn't,
So I have a couple clarifying questions. And first, I guess it's my understanding that that Cambridge is meeting tonight, even though the Wasserman is not having league play, that they're meeting tonight with the intention to answer the question of whether they're going to still have sports. And I don't know exactly what that means. If that's, I guess that's non-league then. The other thing, my understanding is that from the Post article that Whitehall is not going to play no matter what, whether the league plays or not. And that last night Hartford voted to not participate in fall sports no matter what. So in both directions there, those kind of pull in opposite directions. But I guess the Cambridge question then begs the question for us of, does it, at the end of the day, then does it matter what the league does? And then I guess thinking of a hybrid option of, so two different possibilities occur to me is that we go varsity only. And that makes that number quite a bit smaller, right? We subtract out football, we subtract out hockey in this scenario. I think that brings it down to about 26,000. So that's half of that if we went with, and maybe less. I'm just looking at those numbers real
Well,
quick.
there's still varsity hockey, or no? You're saying because of the league situation?
Well, I'm just throwing out possibilities. I mean, I guess there's the two scenarios I was thinking of was varsity only for the sports that can. The other option that I was thinking of was just still paying coaching, potentially paying a coaching stipend, and having students be able to come in and practice. So that, and I guess my varsity idea was back to what I was talking about with Ms. Adams before is, I think for those, obviously for the program, you need to maintain all levels, as many levels as you can. But at this point, I think my thought is we're not actually, we're thinking about what could we do for those seniors to impact them a little bit less. So thinking of not having modified, but having varsity. Then the other thing that has crossed my mind is, do we have a program so they could at least come and practice? I don't know how much interest that would be to students, but inter-squad scrimmages, something that to have life be a little more akin to normal. So anyway, don't know if the board's interested in those, but those make that $51,000 number that the expense wouldn't be that 51, it'd be significantly less than that, but we would maintain something.
So you're thinking of like an intramural type of.
Potentially, or I guess it'll be interesting what, so potentially intramural or varsity soccer, girls, boys soccer, and I mean if Cambridge was able to decide that they were still going to compete despite not having league competition, then could varsity hockey do that also? It'd be abbreviated, and not even sure that's possible. But then the other piece is with Whitehall, Hartford, and I had a potentially Granville as well. I'm not sure where Granville came out on whether they were.
They're not participating in any fall sports.
No matter what. Okay, right. That was what I'd heard as well. So I don't know what that does to number of competitors, but can we do something significantly less than normal, but not completely allow for a senior game, allow for some sort of a sports season to get in?
So I think if I saw also in the Post-Star that the Football Council, I mean, I know we don't really play them, but they moved most of their fall sports to fall 2 or whatever in early spring.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, if wanting to try to keep and it on option on the table, I mean, it's kind of delaying the decision, really. To consider moving it then. I don't know if that's a possibility or not.
It's, you know, if you were to try to set something up as an independent league and say that we're not going to participate in the fall, but we wanted the kids to have the opportunity maybe in the spring in that fall too, and then have it be that intramural piece, or have it, you know, so try to find some type of competition there, because that isn't at the league level. That's not the question. It's just, are we going to do it in the fall or aren't we? To there, the football and volleyball has been moved to that, but nothing else has been moved, you know, to that secondary time slot.
But there's another issue with if we were to have an independent team, let's say, and play an independent soccer game, as soon as the ball is dropped and kicked, a season has happened. And then if we go to fall 2 and we want to have a soccer team, the kids that played in that game are no longer eligible to play. You can't play a second season of a sport in the same school year.
Okay.
So I don't know how Cambridge would do it.
So the option is on the table for all fall sports to move to the fall 2 season? I mean, we can.
That's what Section 2 is calling it, fall 2.
Yeah, so that's what Hartford and at least that's what Hartford's done. I'm not sure whether Whitehall and Granville's intention is to have a fall 2 or just not to have fall sports, but that's exactly what Hartford did, was push them all to fall 2.
Yeah, I think the implied issue is that anybody that is not participating now is going to participate in fall 2.
Okay.
Pending budgetary restrictions and COVID restrictions, right? I mean, it's all a roll of the dice, but
right.
So are we?
Is this
Really
something that you
decision?
need us to take action on? Is this something that we can come to a consensus on? How?
I think the league is waiting on our decision.
Yeah, I would need action.
All right. So
do we know? So we don't know how other where other schools besides those 3 Adirondack League schools feel, what their vote is.
Yeah, no.
We have to vote. We have to assume there's at least 3 that there's about half. If they need our vote, then it's not overwhelming in either direction.
Well, it's not a matter of needing our vote. It was a courtesy to wait for our vote.
Much appreciated.
So entertain a motion to. Dr. Glover, what is your recommendation? I mean, you've really given us both sides, but I have a sense that you're recommending.
Yeah, my lean, I'm just pulling up the ballot to see what the ballot reads.
Yeah.
To their, the way the motion is listed in the ballot is fall athletics is defined by the NISFA in Section 2 for the fall 2020 season. So, you know, for my recommendation to this point, it would be not to play this fall. If the opportunity does come in the spring 2 to there, that we would certainly want to re-entertain that for the opportunity for kids. But I think we're too soon for.
So we need to we don't need to qualify this vote for the fall season to say that if fall 2.
Nope, and I think if, you know, the motion that is put on the ballot is fall athletics is defined by the NISFA in Section 2 for the fall season, which is, you know, starting September 21st, and that's, are we in favor of doing it this fall or not in favor of doing it this fall?
So this is a vote for the league. So we could. Yep.
So, you know, so to that, my recommendation on the ballot would be opposed to the motion.
Okay, so if that's I'm just, point of order, just trying to figure out what it is that you need from us for that. Do you need, because are we voting for the league, but this actually impacts what we do. I mean, we are voting to either
But our students
forego
are going to participate in
participate,
field
so-
hockey, soccer for both boys or girls.
So we I guess my understanding is that we're voting that the league does not have sports, but if the league decides to have sports, if we're in the minority, then we no longer push to spring, and then we would have the discussion about whether we participate in fall sports. Is that correct?
Yep, the way I'm reading it, and Don, correct me if I'm wrong in here, is that the way, I just put the ballot up on the screen for folks to see, is that the motion to approve the proceeding of the fall athletics is defined by the NISBA and section 2 for the fall season. I know this piece here. That is defined right now as September 21st. What's the end date on that, Don?
I don't know the end date on that.
Okay, did they set one?
No, they haven't because of the start of the winter season. There's 3 different versions, I think, now, and they all are pending if a fall 2 season is a go or not.
Okay. So
I
the
probably-
vote the board's taking right now is strictly about this fall.
Correct.
And it
But it's
does
about
say,
this.
After a discussion amongst the chief school officer, the high school principal, and the athletic director. So we know that Dr. Glover is opposed to going forward with the fall sports. Don, what about you? What's your recommendation on this?
I recommend voting no and not playing fall sports, and then working on the fall 2 season when we can include more students, more athletes, and go from there.
I'm still a little bit confused by what we're voting on. If we vote, I said it before and I thought I was clear, but now I'm less clear. Because Don just said that we're voting against in favor of fall 2, but my understanding is.
No. Just voting,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Just go ahead.
it's just on fall sports. Dr. Glover clarified. It's just a vote on fall sports.
That's what I thought. But then you start talking about fall 2, so then I was just. So we're saying that this is just on fall sport. But we're not committing ourselves to not play fall sports. If the league moves forward, and if a majority of the league wants to play fall sports, at that point, then we can decide whether we play fall sports or not.
Correct.
Or okay.
So we're
Now we could also.
whether we want to or not, and then if the league decides to go forward, we could still go forward.
Yes.
Okay.
You're
I
understanding,
can't
Don?
read it, so it's blurry on my screen, so I can't read it. And we also could just independently make the decision right now that we don't want to, whether they do or not. We could go the Hartford route and not. So I just want to, but I want to be clear what we're voting on.
That's clear.
Okay.
And Julie, what are your thoughts on the?
I also agree with Dr. Glover and Mr. Zarzicki that, so I interpret this again as voting, I vote in opposition of running the fall season right now. So I'm thinking of this as it's not that I'm against it, but I'm voting in opposition because I'm concerned that there are not, again, especially because there aren't necessarily a number of teams that may be participating. I think if the fall season does go forward, then that would be a separate discussion, as Dr. Siglowski had said. We might come back. So if the league votes, in favor, the majority says we want to move forward, I think then we come back and have another discussion about some of the concerns that we're raising, whether or not we go forward. But based on a lot of the points that were presented tonight, I would like to vote in opposition as well. And it's not that I don't support the fall season. I think there were a lot of factors to be considered, the health and welfare, but I also think of that even if we do participate, the experience would be limited. And if there is a possibility that we could have that fall 2 season at another time, then we would be able to do that, hopefully with a better experience for our students. So right now, I agree with the opposition vote with Dr. Glover and Mr. Zarzicki.
Can you really say that it's going to be better though with the dates that they're giving us without overlapping? I mean, there's going to be overlapping of sports in which
I
a lot of
agree.
athletes have to choose.
I agree. I'm not necessarily saying it's better, but I'm concerned about, one of the things that we had discussed, and I know it was brought up earlier, was that I'm concerned about the limited daylight. So we possibly might not be able to get complete games in depending on where we're traveling to. I mean, we had that issue last year and we had a regular season, just with the travel time, sometimes we were running close on daylight. So I'm just thinking about the number of teams to compete. I agree that there may be issues with that spring season as well with the weather. They're looking at, I think it was like a March start. There's weather issues, there's field issues. I agree that that might not be as ideal as well, and I guess, both Mr. Zarzicki and Dr. Glover can add to this experience piece. I'm just concerned, and I'm also concerned with some of those health and safety aspects. I think, all schools will go forward with good faith, and if we did participate and everyone who does participate will go in forth in good faith to try to make sure that students are not, who have not been exposed or are not sick when they compete, but that's not a guarantee. And I look at how hard, again, that we've worked to get this school year going. And, I'm concerned, again, I want the kids to have the experience that it can jeopardize a lot in the health and safety aspects. We're very careful. I know we haven't had the mask conversation yet, but we're trying to get the mask breaks correct, the social distancing, and then we're putting our students on the field where we can't guarantee a lot of that experience. I mean, I know the section is and the league that we're all talking about how we can make that work, when you're playing soccer, but the reality is they're not going to be socially distanced the 100% of the time. And my concern is we're trying so hard to accomplish that at school. I don't think we can guarantee that in other aspects. So, I think if we had more time to work on that, but I know we don't have time. They're waiting for our vote. So I'm concerned that we're not prepared for all of those. I don't know if the league is or the section is, quite honestly.
So basically, the three signatures that they're looking for, you're all opposing, and I do support that because, as Ms. Adams just said, I mean, we're 3 days in, we haven't really even demonstrated that we can work out all the kinks here. So, and there's nobody being tested, so we don't know, if we have asymptomatic people that we're intermingling with. So I do support the opposition.
Okay.
I mean, it's an awkward way to say that, but I do support that. But I don't know if you need us to make a decision based on what's on this ballot. I mean, the three of you have the signature on that. If you need us to have a motion on whether we're going to have students participate in any sports for fall,
Do we need to
then
take action, Dave, or is it just their
or
discussion?
do you just need?
The short answer is no. Because when we have other seasons or sports where we say we're not going to run a sport because of X reason, that doesn't go to our board approval.
Right.
But we're talking about the full run of a season, so it's a little different. If the board wants to have into action through motion that the district is not going to participate in those athletics into there, that way it's set and it's the action is part of the minutes that the school district isn't going to participate in athletics in the fall, then the board needs to take action on that.
Okay.
If the board doesn't want that into that, kind of record, keeping piece, and just have us hold it administratively, we can do that as well.
Well, this is the first time we're seeing this, so I'm just trying to be clear as to what you're actually asking of us. If you were just asking about this, then I don't believe that we need to take action. But if you are asking us to determine whether there will be fall sports as they are outlined for 2020 here, I mean.
Nope. As long as, the board is in agreement that we aren't going to do sports in the fall.
No, that's not what I just said.
Okay, so what did you just say?
My point of order is that you are asking us, what you said was you had to vote for the league.
Right.
That's different, and you were very clear that it's different. This
Right.
vote for the league
Right.
is different
Right.
than whether we're going to have a discussion about whether we move forward
Right.
with sports.
Right.
So I'm asking you, what is it that you're asking us tonight? Are you asking just to confirm?
No, right at the start, I said I would ask the board for a motion. At the beginning, I said I'd like board action on this. So I would like the board, under this, I would like the board to act whether it's, is in favor of running sports this fall, or if it's opposed, or if it wishes to abstain.
So we're acting on this actual ballot. You want us to make the decision for this ballot, but we're not talking about for fall 2 or anything forward. We're just talking about this ballot.
We're talking about the fall season, which is defined by the state, is starting September 21st.
So I would make the motion then that, do we have a motion, or I would make the motion to approve proceeding with fall athletics as defined by New York State Public High School Athletic Association, Section 2 for the fall 2020 season. Right, that's the motion we need to make that,
Yep.
and then,
Do we have a second? So if we have no second, the motion fails. Is that how it works?
Did you say?
I mean, do we have to vote on? I mean, I thought this is what we're being asked. I don't understand. Aren't we being asked to? I'm very confused.
We're asking to be opposed to this ballot.
That's what the motion to vote in opposition.
so we'd vote down the motion. Or not second the motion. Either one would work that the motion wouldn't carry.
I don't think we understand what we're asking.
We need a total rewind on this,
No.
okay? We have to actually, I think we have two competing issues here. Number one, you have this ballot that needs to go to the league.
Right.
As soon as some decision's made. But the ballot itself does not indicate that there needs to be any board action on making that decision.
That is correct.
It's the chief school officer, the athletic director, and the high school
That is
principal that
correct.
sign off. Okay, so I asked you whether that's what we were looking at, or did you just want us to confirm that, you know, or, separately, are we actually making a decision about whether we are going to go forward with fall sports here at Salem for Salem students, regardless of what the league does? There are two.
I'm only asking about this ballot.
So we would make a determination, if the league decides to go through with fall sports, we'd have to have another discussion as to whether we were gonna allow it,
Participate.
to participate.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
So it's
So
just,
this is just the ballot.
This is just the ballot. And so everyone understand that this is just about the ballot that's in front of us.
So that's why I
And-
wrote, kind of along the lines of this, after discussion by all, motion to vote in opposition to play the fall sports season, which is what I took off this ballot, but if I'm incorrect, please help me out here.
I think the way you stated it is correct, I think the way Bob stated it was confusing.
But, well, he did the same thing. It's the same thing at the top. It's just
He
that
just-
ballot, right? That's all you're rewriting.
I just read what was on the ballot.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah,
it's
because
my
the motion,
So I guess I didn't
the
understand.
motion is to approve proceeding with,
Okay, so then if
No,
we
that's the
second,
whole motion.
and then if we take a vote.
then we need a second on that, and if you, we would either vote yes or no. No would be the opposed.
right.
Okay,
So-
got it now.
Perfect.
The motion is, I would like to entertain a motion to approve proceeding with fall athletics as defined by the NISBA in section 2 for the fall 2020 season.
And Bob has that on the table.
Okay?
We're looking for a second.
All right,
So we second it to vote on it.
correct.
Yes.
Okay, so I can second that.
All right. All those in favor of approving the motion, please signify by saying aye.
This is the motion to oppose.
No,
No.
to
No.
approve. This is
So
to
if you
approve.
want,
Not participate.
No,
No.
to approve.
If-
Okay, yes.
Approve. So if we approve it, then we're saying yes.
Yes, yes.
If we
got it.
oppose it, we say no. So if we, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So we have the motion, we have a second. All those in favor of approving the motion, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails, 0-5.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the clarification,
See,
everybody.
this is why we only need 2-hour meetings, because this is the fatigue is setting in, okay. The next item is the mask side, and I've had several people bring that up to me, what the actual process for masks here in school is, that there seems to be periods of time when there's not consistent mask wearing. We aren't testing people. We don't know who's coming in. We have adults who don't wear them sometimes in the building. And I'm just reporting what people have said. So, and I noticed that, when people sit down, they take their masks off, but then sometimes they get up and they move. So I just would, there's also things been said to kids who keep them on, why are you wearing them, kind of some mask shaming kind of thing. But, I know it's all new, but I just want to make sure that there's a clear message, what that message is, and whether people are wearing masks for the majority of the time that they're here in the building. I mean, we're sitting here, we've got the windows closed. I mean, I don't know if we're setting the best example, so.
Well, we're 6 feet apart.
But it's still, there's no ventilation in the room, so.
But the door's open. And so in the regulations, it says for ventilation, either, by the regs, either mechanically or I forget the other piece of it. So by keeping the door open, that allows for additional air into the room, which would allow for appropriate ventilation.
Is that what's happening?
Yes. To my knowledge, I'll let the principals ask the details. At my level on this, it's, we have kind of two camps. It's on a spectrum. There's the camp where it's, we're not going to wear a mask, they don't work, it's that side of an opinion. And then there's the polar opposite of that is the masks are the only thing that should be on all the time, every time, all the time. Mm-hmm. And the regulations don't read that way. They don't read either way. Regulations talk about face coverings and masks. So most of the people I've seen are wearing masks. For kids and adults, most are in masks. And it's wearing the mask when you are not in a situation where when you're in a situation where you cannot maintain social distancing of at least 6 feet to there. Breaks are allowed in particular situations, like if this were a classroom and it needed a mask break, this would be an appropriate setting to do that. If we were doing group work, it would not be an appropriate setting. Everyone should be having their masks on. And that isn't any different for adults as it is for kids. That if there's an adult, like in my office, my mask isn't on. I'm the only adult within 6 feet, 12 feet of me sometimes. So my mask isn't on when I'm at my desk. But that's what the regulations read. We do have some folks who would like it more stringent that we've had some conversations with as we approached. But we've also had some other folks have concerns about they're not going to be able to handle a mask or wear a mask or do that, and so we've addressed that too. So Karen or Julie, if you've got anything you want to add to that?
I would just add at the high school level, we have gone a little stricter. Sorry, the floor machine's going by. Where we are asking that students, and this is a whole building situation, students, faculty, staff, when you're on the move, you're in the hallways, restroom, on the buses, whether or not you're socially distanced, we're asking that masks be worn. But again, we are working within the guidelines that if a student is seated and socially distanced, the desks are facing forward in all of our classrooms. That's also one of the requirements. So in those cases, they are permitted breaks. There are a lot of different classroom sizes. Some classes might have 3 students in the same size room. In another class, there could be 12 students that are also socially distanced. So depending on the size of the classroom, the opportunity and the amount of movement in the classroom. The teachers are determining the frequency of breaks. I think it's also dependent a little bit on, and Karen can talk elementary, a little bit also the age of the students. So if, for example, we're not saying a mask break is 2 minutes or 5 minutes. We have not defined that. I know there are some questions on that. We have kind of a few teachers have, after the first day or two, realized they need to be more specific. So they've been, as far as to my knowledge, is we've got to the point now on day 3 where if students are seated and socially distanced, all of our desks are set up to be socially distanced in our seating arrangements. If we can't have socially distanced classrooms at the high school, we have one class where we needed to break that into 2 classrooms and have the teacher do remote instruction into the second room so that we could have all the students seating socially distanced. So what would happen there is the older students are communicated if you need to take a mask break, you can, if you're seated, remove your mask break for a short period of time. We have not defined that. Some students might take it down for less than a minute. Others may have it off for a few minutes. There was one class where after further conversation, we felt like that came to my attention. I spoke with the teacher. We felt like the break was a little too long for the students. That was the first day of instruction. Upon reflection, the teacher clarified that and had his procedure for breaks that were more defined. So we are working through it, but again, as Dr. Glover said, at our level, we are getting that communication that some people are really expecting us to be stricter than the guidelines, and then others are concerned that their students. We have classes that are 83 minutes, so to expect anybody, I think, to not have a break within 83 minutes, I think that's expecting a lot. And we do want to find a way to permit mask breaks. Certainly, we're open to this conversation and the direction of the board. If you would like us, if we want to have a discussion about defining how long a mask break is, we're certainly open to that. But we have been working to stay within the guidelines. So that's, and I'm happy to answer questions. We don't have it. We're still, working on getting it just right, but I feel like we're moving forward. But we are, as far as I know, within guidelines and the situations I've looked into, we have been found to be within what the Department of Education and Department of Health have required of us. If the board and the superintendent advise us to go a more strict expectation, we will certainly follow that. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Vieira.
So for me, it definitely, I think, looks a little different. When I look at that first day and some of our pre-Kers and kindergartners were getting out of the car, the parents were saying, well, they've never worn a mask before, so here we are, we're putting the masks on them. And we talk to them about, we wear our mask when we're in the hall, and it's a lot of rules for them. It's a lot of trying to get them to understand. And, as I pop into the rooms, I see the kids at their desks, even the little guys at their desks, their masks are off, they're taking those breaks. When they go to then move throughout the room, I hear the teachers telling them, okay, when we get up, we put our mask on. So for a lot of our younger kiddos, it's definitely a learning process. But I got to tell you, like today's group, I watched them come down the hallway to go out to their buses, and all of them had their masks on coming out of pre-K. Like, to me, that was amazing. I mean, if they can figure out how to do this and they're okay with it, and walking into the room even on Monday with her first group, and here they were, hands-on doing this or playing with that. And, there were kids who were by themselves. They had their masks off. For those that were closer to each other, they had their masks on. So I think it's more of getting to understand what's appropriate for grade levels. For our kiddos, it looks different because there is more movement within those time blocks. We don't have 80 minutes in one room, and if we do, it's usually broken up by, okay, we're going to go do this now, we're going to do that. There's far more movement throughout their day. So I think that really kind of makes it look different at our level, but I've been extremely impressed. Windows have been open, doors are open to get some fresh air going through there. It definitely looks different at our level, but I've been impressed, and the teachers have just been encouraging these kiddos to wear their masks, and they've been doing a great job.
Well, thank you for that. It wasn't a criticism. It was just
Oh, yeah.
it's an unsettling time for a lot of people, and the more education that everybody gets, from your pre-Ks all the way up through to, you know, parents and people in the community about masks and when they're worn and when they're not worn, it will help to alleviate some of the anxiety about the whole thing. So rather than put out a lot of little fires, and I just thought it would be better just to say, this is the policy, this is, you know, you're following the guidelines, and kids are being encouraged, and as long as you want to wear a mask, you know, wear it. I mean, there are people that wear them for 8-hour days, so, you know, I wear my mask sometimes, you know, if I'm visiting people, I have it on for a very long period of time. So I do think you're right, it is situational, but as long as those are being addressed, that helps me to put people in the right direction and reassure them that kids are doing the right thing. So
The great thing about kids is they're funded, and they learn and they pick up their
they're very resilient.
And I have found in my school experience, which we have the same policy, in our classrooms, our desks are 6 feet apart so they can remove their masks. Once they stand up, it goes on. As long as our adults in our building are setting a good example and being positive about it, I guess that's where I would come from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, it's not my favorite thing to do, but this is what we have to do if we want to be together. And my 6th graders, who are not fans of school, most of them, are super excited to be back in school, just to be in school. And it's not their ideal setting, but they're happy to be back. So I guess, as long as our adults and our teachers are being good role models, I feel like we can easily adjust it gets harder as, you know, you move through the ages. But that's my biggest, I think, is we have to have the same expectation of our adults that we do of our students.
So just a quick thought. So, you know, it's good discussion. I mean, we really weren't involved at all in any even awareness of a reopening plan until the community forums. And, you know, so I think it's good for us to have a little bit of opportunity to throw this around. You know, I think when we talk about the regs, I mean, we just voted a moment ago to not follow regs and not do something we could, which was fall sports. And I think that makes sense, but that's a pretty low bar. And so I think, you know, as far as just following the regs, we may want to do more than that. And you know, maybe we don't. But the one thing that there is a fair, you know, there is some science and data for those who still believe in science and data that net gaiters are actually not only not effective, but maybe worse than not even wearing a mask. So, you know, I think the regs in New York haven't kept up with that. But to me, that's a huge oversight. And something that, you know, I think is certainly counterintuitive to me that would be allowed. Their piece, I think, is, you know, we've just given lots of lip service to time and expense for reopening. And, you know, when you think about the cumulative risk of sports, or the cumulative risk of, now certainly it'd be closer, but you're talking about lots of people hours and lots of potential exposure in school. So I guess I just want to make sure that, you know, as I said, we weren't involved in any of the discussion of the reopening plan. Probably should have been, because we're talking about spending money. We spent money on PPE, and there's budgetary implications of what we're doing. And so I guess I just want to make sure that we're protecting our investment in all the time and effort that you've all put in, and that we're not going to through either lack of carelessness, or actually through carelessness, or lack of compliance, or lack of setting example by any adults that could derail this investment that we're making.
So is that something that comes up in conversation as you're taking a look at, sort of how the week goes and you break down, I mean, do you ever have like a debriefing on how the week goes and whether
Yeah.
that's something that needs to be addressed?
Well,
Because as Bob said, and Jackie said, sometimes it's more the adults that aren't
Mhm.
setting the proper example than kids themselves. My 6-year-old granddaughter is better at the mask than I am because that's just what she does, so you're right. She
Well,
knows she needs to have
I
it
will
on.
openly admit when the 911 call came in, and when I finally got a hold of what I thought was another just false alarm, and someone yelled it back at me, "No, the bus is on fire," I didn't have my mask. I was headed somewhere else to get buses going. We do have conversations, remembering state police. So after day one, we had that first conversation of how to improve the next day. Tomorrow being the last day, we'll likely have another. We're already planning some kind of debriefing conversations with teachers on Friday, about like remote learning, and this certainly could be part of those conversations of how did the week go, and with the mask pieces, and just those conversations about how they went are happening. But yeah, we're going to have those conversations, and then we'll adjust for improvement as we go.
So are there a lot of kids that wear the gaiters?
I'll defer to Karen and Julie, but from what I saw, I have not seen a lot of gators out there. I see vast majority of it being masks.
They don't stay on well. I do notice that we allow it in Arlington, but we make them double them. So you can't just wear it thin, it has to be doubled over in order to be worn. But I find that those are the ones where the kids are pulling them up constantly or they're falling down constantly, but whereas a regular mask, they seem to stay on better. So I feel like most people have switched to the regular mask versus the gaiter.
I guess the other piece I'd look at is the cost of being wrong, right? So if we are wrong, personally, I think that we're not being strict enough with it, and I would be in favor of making it stricter. And if that's not the will of the board, that's fine. But when we look at the cost of being wrong, we're looking at some inconvenience and very minor discomfort, or something much bigger. And so to me, it's fairly low-hanging fruit to take a more cautious approach. And if others aren't either don't agree with that or aren't willing to say that, I'm willing to say that. I think that we're being a bit renegade, looking at just the time and expense that's gone into to develop this plan to move forward. So that's my perspective.
So you would like us to do what, I guess is the question.
Well, I would be in favor of having everybody have their mask on all the time.
I mean,
That's what
Well, when they're eating or, but it's in the classroom. And, even if they're at their desk.
One of my kids said that he had his on all day, other than lunch. I mean, I don't know about the other.
So it wouldn't be a big change, right? For some kids, maybe then it
Right.
wouldn't be a major shift.
I mean, I do think at some point they need to be able to have a little break. I mean, off
Well,
and on. If they're at lunch or they're outside maybe or whatever, I don't know.
But even outside,
I don't think
You
the
still
playground is the
can't-
place to do it, no, but if they were spread out reading on the front lawn or whatever, maybe that's, or they go out and take an air break, I don't know.
classes can be held outside if
Right.
there's safe places to have them out there, but.
So I guess I would find this hard because it's a lot easier to start off like very strict and move differently, but now to have started and now to implement something
Yes.
extreme, compared to what this is, that's how I would assume students would take it, adults would take it.
I 100% agree. I agree, and I think it's unfortunate that it's unfortunate that we didn't work harder. I guess I take as much responsibility as I would put on anybody else that to insert ourselves in a discussion that we should have been part of. Right? I mean, really, when I learn of how other schools approach this, our approach was very, very different, and that we weren't part of a discussion. It wasn't even presented to us, and we were left to learn about it at community forums, which would be awkward, right? It'd be awkward for a board member to be asking naive questions at a community forum, and I think that was inappropriate. So I completely agree, Jackie. Right? It's so much easier to go from being more strict to less strict. Unfortunately, we're kind of paid into this corner. Now, this isn't a hill to die on for me, but that's my perspective. Is that that I just want to protect our investment.
But you're saying Granville, they're allowing them to, when you're at your desk or whatever, you can take it off and have
Yeah.
a break.
I
That's
mean,
what
any other
we allow
place.
for that off and on.
Any other place.
You have to
We
have
it on,
Yeah.
I mean, my kids don't leave the classroom, so they're only in one spot all day long.
Yeah.
They don't
So
leave
they
the
don't-
room.
We do have a neighboring district. We do have a neighboring district that is no gators, masks, everybody with masks all the time. So it isn't a crazy idea, right? I mean, it's within the range of normal.
No, but I
But
like
it's
I said,
Friday.
it's gonna be hard because we've already set a precedence that you can have
That was
breaks
set
and
before
things.
the start of school.
So.
It would have been much easier to run. We find ourselves here.
Well, I just think that they should be encouraged. Maybe if we don't go the whole route of saying, mandated, but encouraged. I think, the more we can do to keep that separation, washing, doing all those things that are recommended to us, I think will pay dividends. Because I certainly do not want to have to go through that contact tracing and
Neither do
go
I.
through the,
But at some point, unfortunately, the odds are it's going to happen.
reality is, yeah.
It's just how long can we prolong it?
Well,
Yeah.
we also, there's no testing either, so I mean,
Yeah.
there's no,
Um,
no ability to know
I
how we're doing.
I'm kind of hoping, based on the Oneonta case, I know it's college, but there seems to be some rapid testing pieces now available that would allow us to capture some of that more easily. I don't think schools are the place to do that testing. I don't think we're the agents to do those tests. But if there's that rapid test rather than the 2-week delay, that is more readily available to everybody, that would help a lot. They aren't as sensitive, as I understand it, as the swabs are. Because that would at least give you an idea of who are those asymptomatic kids, or adults even, that would have that to be able to address that more quickly. But I didn't even know the rapid tests were available until I read it in the paper about the Oneonta case when we had to close the school down. It's something that became more prevalent. I think that would be really beneficial. But testing's an issue in this area.
So despite the rapid tests exist, but there's no plan to do any sort of screening or testing at this point, right? That would be based on having a positive and then contact tracing follow-up likely?
All of the, through the regs and with cooperation with the Washington County Department of Health, our only job is to do that initial screening, to make the determination of do we have a potential COVID case. And then if we do, then it's to work with the parent about getting the child to medical care and then notifying the health department about the potential of a COVID case. And then we basically do what the health department tells us. And follow whatever they tell us to do, and then work on our end of making sure that we can track where was the student at what time and who did he or she, or adult, who did he or she come in contact with, to be able to share that information with the Washington County Health Department, because the Washington County Health Department is using the state tracers to do all the tracing. And from what I understand, it's not a quick thing. It takes some time to go through it. Actually, Ms. Vieira and I went through a very brief version of that very first instance in February where we got the phone call about the party at the Sky Dome. It was like, okay, who's the student and who's everyone else who might have been connected to it at that party, so we had that just in case back when this whole started. So at this point, it's, follow what the regs are due. We're having conversations with the Department of Health. I think I have a meeting with them, I think it's tomorrow. If not, it's updates that they're getting and the cooperation between schools and the Department of Health. They've been a wonderful resource to us, and we keep moving along in that direction.
And then if we do have a case?
Yeah, if we have a case, then we follow just what I walked everyone through. We have a case, the
And
contract.
then as far as the masks, I mean,
Oh,
would we change any protocols? Would you change any procedures? Would you change?
It depends it depends on the case. if the case comes up and it didn't have anything to do with school, that it was, they were at, their cousin Joe's downstate this weekend, and someone was at that party who had the sign, we would certainly make sure we're re-emphasizing the social density, keep it lower, and kind of the four golden rules, if you will, to make sure those pieces are into place. And if the health department said to us directly that, all masks all the time, or, said that all the adults need to wear gloves, or whatever they told us, we would do.
So is there a point person on this? So if somebody has any questions,
Mhm.
and if things are in flux, who's the point person?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
So for example, I mean, tonight, it was wonderful to see all those kids on the playground, but not a single one of them had a mask. There was probably 20 kids out there,
Yep.
no masks. I mean, I know we can't really control that, but we're controlling it all day long, and then there's no controlled environment out there at the end of the day when everybody's out there running around.
And we don't have, like you
Can we
said.
put a sign out that says, please use a mask? I don't know, or social distance,
Yeah,
or,
we can.
I mean, I don't know if it's gonna help, but at least we're.
We can, but it doesn't necessarily mean, that it's gonna be followed. Remember, the kids have gone through 6 months of, outside of here, they haven't had these constraints necessarily, unless the family has decided it's important. So if the family has said you have to wear your mask when you go outside and it's kind of taught it, and they've always, then that has happened. If not, then not. Which is why I say, at some point, we're gonna have a positive case. It just how long can we prolong it, is to there, but when they leave us, we don't have any control over that any longer.
I'm not talking, I'm just talking about.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
So,
But
Say
when
that
we're
again,
here,
I didn't hear that.
I said I'm really just focused on when they're here during
Yeah.
the school day. I mean, that's,
Right.
I'm focused on, it's a controlled environment.
Yep.
Just to make sure that it is the safest that it can possibly be for the students and the adults and all the staff people who come through.
and on day 3, we're doing a great job.
And I think, it's a fluid situation too,
Yeah.
so that if we did decide that it needs to be more strict, we're saying, really this isn't working out, like, that could happen,
Yeah.
so.
Maybe we need to reevaluate after a week or so.
So I don't want to hear any reports of adults not setting phenomenal examples, because I will bring this back up if that happens. I think that adults need to set that bar very high and comply with all that, because otherwise it makes a mockery of the process.
Great. Any further discussion?
I mean, I just know, just to throw this out there, our students have been told that there's one warning, and they get one warning only, that if they're not wearing their mask, then they're going to be asked to leave. And we were told the same as adults by our superintendent.
Is there an expectation about the way the mask will be worn? Is if somebody's wearing their mask over their mouth and below their nose, is that wearing the mask?
No, it needs to cover both. Needs to cover both.
Both facial items.
So, just.
That seems reasonable.
Any further discussion? Bob, you we added something about notice.
So I was just concerned last week when we met, we were supposed to have a workshop, had been warned as a workshop. To the best I can tell, the warning never changed. And we actually ended up having some budgetary discussion. Is mostly about approach and strategy of how we wanted to approach a question, not really going through line by line. But it was of grave concern to me. I mean, if one of the couple things that gets me to jump up and down on the table is when we break open meetings law and when we're not transparent. And I think transparency is so much in our favor right now. I mean, look at all the people who are here. What do we have, 25 or 30 people? And it was the board and administrators. And I wouldn't have participated in the meeting moving forward, but it was being videoed. So I felt like there was then the opportunity for people to see that. And we didn't make any decisions. But I think it's really, just strategically, even putting open meetings law aside for a moment, strategically, it's so important for people to see us struggle with these decisions, because I think at some point we're going to have to likely make some hard decisions. And I think people are more accepting of those if they realize the struggle that we've put into those decisions and that we've considered all angles. And that's why I want to put all this stuff on the table. And it looks bad. It's a really bad look for the board when we're meeting and people think we're just meeting to talk about the board self-evaluation, and then we end up having any sort of budgetary discussion. Now, luckily, there were a couple of people that did find out about the meeting and tuned in at some point during the meeting, but I mean, that cannot happen. It cannot happen. It can never happen. And I think we need to think about, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to make sure that that doesn't happen? Because it's not acceptable. And I mean, I just won't participate in a meeting again where that happens. And I think we need to figure that out.
I think it's very important. What is the process? We changed that meeting at your request in order to do the cafeteria and what, but I didn't realize it, but Bob checked, it never made it onto the website
As a special meeting.
as a special meeting.
I'll check with Gina because we did.
Is it Gina that does it?
Yeah, Gina, when we make the changes that got on, and Karen did the changes inside.
I did the changes
And
inside,
fair.
and I asked Gina, because I don't do the website, and we talked, and I said, I'll do the outside like I always do, you do the inside. He did direct us to do it, and I did do the changes inside. I don't know why it didn't happen on the website.
So I'll just double check with Gina and see what happened.
Also, did it go to Facebook? Because really, you know, if people checked it once, they wouldn't necessarily check back in a day later to see if it was still a workshop or if actually it had morphed into a meeting. I mean, I think that's an example where, you know, if we're, it's very practicable, right? That's what the law is to the extent practicable. It's very practical to get that onto Facebook. Best I can tell, it never made it to Facebook. And I think these are T's that have to be crossed and I's that have to be dotted. They have to be, particularly in this environment. So I don't, you know, so then who's responsible to make sure that that gets Facebook, that gets pushed out, even the.
Yeah, Amy does all of our Facebook things. I'm not sure if I'm just looking to see if I'd include her in that email. I'm not sure I did. So if I missed Facebook, that's my fault. Because if I didn't get it to her to change it, she wouldn't know to change it. I'm just looking to see where that email is to Karen and.
So we need to have a dedicated person with a dedicated protocol for noticing of meetings. Because if we're talking about a Google Calendar to have all of the committee meetings that need notices and the meetings and any special meetings that we have, we need to have, it can't be piecemeal. It needs to be a dedicated process to get that done.
Okay. Well, that's in part the board still does need to, with Karen leaving us, kind of the gong at the end, for our district clerk, I think we could set that expectation for the district clerk is when those changes happen, that becomes a district clerk responsibility.
Who will be
But it's the
following?
superintendent's responsibility to set up the meetings.
Yep. But
Which is
so
part of the
so
setup.
if you're telling me that superintendent come up
Well,
with a,
superintendent and the superintendent secretary.
yeah, well, if you're telling me that you want the superintendent's office to come up with a unified protocol for what happens to happen to do that, I will do that. If you want it to be, you know, district clerk, because we have to have a new one, and want that process to there for unified, because right now right now for the superintendent's office, the superintendent lets, 3 people know.
Well, it's all in policy what the district clerk does and
Yep.
your office. So your office is to set up the meetings and the district clerk
Okay.
does other things. It's identified in policy what those responsibilities are. So it is not the responsibility of the district clerk to get that notice out, except for the annual meetings.
So my apologies in not changing the name, because that would fall to me, and I'll work with Gina on having something more concrete for future meetings.
I think the name got changed. It wasn't so much the name, right? Because I think the name got changed. But at the end of the day, if board members are getting together, it's a meeting. You call it what you want. It's a meeting, and I think that has to be noticed, and it has to be noticed accurately. And I think it has to go to Facebook. I mean, I even think in that case when it was sort of 11th hour, we probably should have used the phone home system to let people know, because I mean, clearly the number of people who are here tonight, people are interested, they want to know, and I think, you know, even in regular run-of-the-mill meetings, we have a good turnout, and so to have nobody there or 1 or 2 people there was, I mean, it's embarrassing to me as a board member that and I'm embarrassed for the board, I'm embarrassed for the school that happened, and that just can't happen again.
I did have a couple people comment that they didn't realize that there was a 4 o'clock start time versus the 6 o'clock start time. So there were a couple people that asked me if it had been recorded, and I, directed them that it would be recorded.
Open meetings law is our friend. We need to embrace it, and we need to be as transparent as possible, particularly in times like right now.
And it does, even though we're tasking you with that, or your office to do that, it is the board's oversight to make sure that that law is adhered to. So I'm with Bob. I've had these conversations. You know how I feel about it. We just it's there. We need to do that. We need to tell people what we're doing and how we're doing it. All right. I don't believe we do have a policy meeting coming up, but we'll have news at the next meeting probably. And any topics for future board meetings? If you do,
Budget clearly is going to continue to be
I think there's going to be continuing ones there. But if anybody has anything, we can email me or Dr. Glover, and we can get something onto the agenda. At this point, I'd like to open it back up to the public for public comment. If there's.
Hi guys, it's Stacy Rich. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, good. So thanks a lot for your discussion, and I totally agree with the transparency. I appreciate that. So I just wanted to kind of have it as a point of clarity. Obviously, I'm going to talk about fall sports. I just wanted to clarify whether or not you guys. I want to make sure that what your motion was. I understand not to proceed with fall sports in the fall, but your understanding is that the league goes to the fall 2 schedule, that you would support the fall sports being played in the fall 2 schedule, which would be, March 1st to May 8th is the dates that they have given us. Was my question clear, or should I restate it?
I think your question was clear. Yeah, I think it was clear. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
No, that's okay. We struggled with this one, Stacy, and I'm really sorry about that there was confusion, but there was a lot of confusion on the floor here too. What that vote, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because we bounced this around several times, it was just a vote for the league as to whether we supported the league going forward. So with just this period of fall sports. So we have not had a complete conversation about this yet, about how we would move forward with sports and how we would support it. It was just to address the ballot for the league.
So just to address the current time frame that we're in right now. So right now, our vote was to not play fall currently.
No.
Currently.
So right now, our vote was to that we're, as part of the league, the vote was to not have the league participate in fall sports. Now, at this point, then we'd be waiting to see what the league says. If the league says, if there's more votes at the league, at least 7 votes at the league to have fall sports, then they have the question of, do we participate? So at this point, we didn't really get into discussion on fall 2. And probably that's a can we could kick down the road for a while. But
and I guess just to kind of, I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to interrupt. I guess I was confused there for a little bit, because again, I was looking at the letter that only required, the superintendent and, the principal and the athletic director. So my concern for a little while, be completely transparent, because that's what we're talking about, was whether or not fall sports was going to be, I didn't know if we were looking at taking fall sports off the table altogether, so that like if the league were to proceed with a fall 2 schedule, as if, I was fearful. It appeared as if maybe that was what Dr. Glover was asking. So I just am asking for clarity on that piece. But
just the ballot was all we voted on, was the ballot.
All right. So my last kind of point of emphasis, and it kind of touches base a little bit of what Bob was saying, but I wanted to bring attention to you guys, and I'm sure that many of you are aware, but what the section has, or what the state has proposed, is this alternative schedule possibility. And again, what we're going to be able to do, but it's very ambitious for our 3-season athletes. If we were to move to a alternative sports schedule. The winter season is proposed, one of the proposals is January 4th to March 13th. That would be your traditional winter sports, your basketball, your wrestling, your those. Then it would go March 1st to May 8th would be your spring, your fall. That's fall 2. You see the overlap there. And then it would go right into spring, which would be April 5th to June 12th. So I just feel like it's worth just food for thought. And again, maybe this is all new. Maybe sports don't happen at all. But I have a bit of skin in the game with a senior. And I've been with these girls, this program, for 15 years. That is a very ambitious schedule. And I worry tremendously about the taxing that it would take on especially our senior group of kids. They would start potentially January 4th and play through. I'm again hoping they can participate in all 3 sports. They would play through June 12th. Again, I don't know how that looks. I mean, I coach 2 of those varsity positions. I coach that fall sport and I coach that spring sport. There's an overlap there. I don't know what the board stance would be. I would do absolutely whatever is necessary to maintain, sports for these kids. And just to kind of tie into what Bob was saying a bit, if we have nothing, obviously we're here for the education and academics, but y'all know, I look at that board, there's a lot of athletes there, and I'm one of them, and I went here. Everybody knows that. Sports is often the carrot that keeps kids going. And the mental need, the concern I have is, I tell you what, I mean, my own kid, losing athletics this year is going to be really, really difficult. So I kind of, urge you to consider the thought of some sort of an alternate way to give kids an outlet. Gym looks really different right now for these kids. They don't have anything traditional, and I get that. Every school district, you get that. But if there was a way to keep kids going, or if you guys were willing to allow some form of a physical outlet for these kids, trust us coaches to put our heads together and figure out what those protocols would look like, what the guidelines would be. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be biased. Give our athletes the first chance to participate in these events so that they have somewhat of an outlet to help their mental toughness through this time. So I've seen it firsthand. This has taken a toll on a lot of kids. And I just urge you guys to keep it in the back of your minds, and maybe at some point you can have some further discussions on it. I really appreciate all the work you guys do. It's just incredible to think of that any group of people could cover every possible aspect of this pandemic and its impact on the school. So thanks for all that you do, and thanks for the open forum. I appreciate the comment opportunities.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's another perspective for us, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Socrates, Fraunhofer, and then Kristen have mentioned in chat that they want to comment. So, Sock, go ahead.
Well, actually, it's Karen. Sorry about that. I just, once again, to repeat, Stacy, I would like to thank you for all your hard work. And I know when you're looking at budget cuts that it's extremely difficult. But I would like to put my parent hat on as a parent of a senior who has a lot of AP classes. I guess my questions are, if you wait until October and they've taken them that long, and now they're gone, are they able to go into other electives? Because it's going to leave some pretty big holes in some schedules. Like AP Lit can go to regular English, but as far as I would understand it, there wouldn't be another math class to replace AP Calc, or another class to replace AP Spanish or replace AP Psych. So when these kids are looking to apply to colleges and now they have 2 or 3 study halls in their schedule, how does that look? And just so when you're thinking of things, I just wanted those things to be kept in mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kristen.
Yes, this is Kristen Eastman. I'm the parent of a kindergartner, but I also work as a high school counselor in Vermont. And I wanted to mention when you had said that or talked about cutting AP classes, I don't know what the New York regulations are on using other programs, but we use a program through BYU Independent Study that offers AP courses, and they cost about $580 per student to do that course. I don't know that it could be approved as a core requirement for New York, but if students wanted to finish AP Spanish or AP Psych or classes like that, I don't know if that's an option the school could look at. Again, it's $580 per student per class. So I don't know if that's an option that could be used, but I wanted to mention that we use that in our school, just for students who want to take an AP class that we don't offer. And then also, thank you for all your discussion on everything. I can't imagine what you're all going through, but I do have personal concerns with the face masks. I don't really like hearing that there are adults not wearing masks or kids on the playground without masks. And I think it's kind of a excuse to say, well, we already started school, so we can't discuss that. The school I work in, we have very strict requirements on what type of face masks. Students know the requirements. It's part of our dress code. They can be worn. And yes, it may take some adjustment for younger kids to get used to, but if the expectation is set, then the students will follow it. So I just, I know everyone's trying, but I don't like to hear that it's kind of, oh, well, we can't talk about it because school already started, so we haven't set the expectation. I know it's harder to set an expectation once things have already started, but I have faith in students following things if staff and administration are enforcing them. So I don't think it's a horrible idea to talk about those things. But again, I appreciate all that you're doing. I know working in the school is very stressful. I know everything going on, but those were the two things I wanted to mention, just that there are alternative options for AP courses if that's really the route you're going. It's an independent study program, so it's self-paced. There isn't, it's not the same as being in a class, but if a student really wanted to take the AP course, they could do that if that would be allowed. And then just the face masks, I'm definitely in support of making sure students are wearing them and faculty are wearing them, especially if they can't distance on the playground or other places like that. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else, Dan, that?
I don't see anybody else.
Is there anybody
do.
else that?
I do. Brenda Levy. Yeah. Hi guys. I just wanted, I know this same thing with the budget. I realize that things are tough, but as the WASIA president, and I realize that the cuts had to be made with the aides and stuff, but I just feel like I really just need to let you know that they're working really hard at doing it, and Karen Vieira has been phenomenal trying to get them all of their breaks and everything that they need. It's been very tough to look at them face to face every day, knowing what they had gone through. And I hope that hopefully everything straightens out and they do get some of their time back and stuff. But I just wanted you to know that they're getting through it, but it's been very tough for the aides especially. And my second thing is Karen McGregor. I'm gonna miss you. I love you, girlfriend. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
And that's
Thank
it.
you, Brenda.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks, Brenda.
Is there anybody else? So at this point, I think that we can we can close the public comment section and entertain a motion to close the meeting.
Move.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody.